Welcome to Partner Technical Services Product Release Training. The Microsoft Dynamics AX 2012 Financial Management New Features Collections Management course will be presented by Senior Support Engineer Ryan Clevin. This course only covers new features, so knowledge of previous versions of Microsoft Dynamics AX is a prerequisite. This course was developed based on beta versions of Microsoft Dynamics AX 2012, so there may be some slight differences in the release product. Now let me introduce Ryan Clevin.
Welcome to Microsoft Dynamics AX 2012 Financials Management New Features. Today we'll talk about Module 8, Collections Management in Microsoft Dynamics AX 2012. My name is Ryan Clevin. I'm the Senior Support Engineer on the AX Financials Application Support Team. Today, again, we'll talk about the Collections Management functionality in Microsoft Dynamics AX 2012, a new module. So let's get into lesson number 1, which we'll talk about an overview of collections management. This lesson introduces the collections management functionality in Microsoft Dynamics AX 2012. In Microsoft Dynamics AX 2012, the collections management functionality brings accounts receivable information into a central view. You'll be able to set up collection agents. Once collection agents are set up, the agent will be able to perform collection processes such as logging their collection activities, communicating with customers, and executing collection-specific tasks in Microsoft Dynamics AX 2012. Through collections management, you will be able to define the steps in the collection process that will allow collection agents to better organize their correspondence with customers. So let's get into lesson 2, additional collection parameters. This lesson introduces the additional parameters added into accounts receivable that are specific to collections management functionality in Microsoft Dynamics AX 2012. So for Microsoft Dynamics AX 2012, there are additional parameters added into the accounts receivable module that are specific to the collections management module. These parameters are found on the Collections tab of the Accounts Receivable Parameters form. The parameters that you define here will drive how collection management functions in Microsoft Dynamics AX 2012. So let's go into AX and take a look at the additional collection parameters. So I'm going to start by going to Accounts Receivable, Setup, Accounts Receivable Parameters. In the Accounts Receivable Parameters form, there's a Collections tab. And these are the parameters that are specific to collections functionality in Microsoft Dynamics AX 2012. So let's take a look at some of these options. The first option, exclude disputed transactions from fee calculations. If you mark this option, we will not generate collection letters for transactions that have a status of disputed in the collections form. Update collection letter code. When you mark this option, you define when the collection journal is updated to the next step in the collection letter sequence. We'll talk about the collection letter sequences later on. The options that you have to select in the update collection letter code include posting and printout. Again, we have a couple of labs later on that we'll talk about, and we'll be able to see how these settings relate to the printing of actual collection letters and the transaction that will appear on each respective letter. Interest calculation. When you select this option, you are defining which transactions should have interest calculated for the collections management process. The options available here include open and closed. When you select this option, invoices that are open for payment and invoices that are closed but were paid later than their due dates will be eligible to have interest calculated. When you select open, only invoices that are open or outstanding will be eligible to have interest calculated. And closed. When you select this option, only invoices that are closed but were paid later than their due date will be eligible to have interest calculated. The adjustment invoice date value. When you select this option, you are defining which date will be used as the adjusted invoice date value for interest. The options available here include the interest note date. So when you mark this, when you select interest note date, the adjustment invoice date will use the date from the interest note. And the second option being current system date. When you select this option, the adjustment invoice date will use the system date of the AX session. Customer limit for waived interest and fees. You have some functionality to be able to enter a customer limit for waiving interest and fees. You can click the Manage Waive Limits button available here to drill into the details of the waive limits. Minimum number of days to allow waived interest and fees. When you calculate interest, you can enter the number of days here to allow waived interest and fees. The number that you enter here will be used when you calculate interest. And conversely, the maximum number of days to allow waived interest and fees. When you calculate interest, enter the maximum number of days here to allow waived interest and fees. This again will be used when you calculate interest. The aging period definition field. When you select this option, you are defining which aging period definition will be used in the collections form as a default. Aging period definitions are new to Microsoft Dynamics 2012, as they are essentially replacing the concept of aging buckets from Microsoft Dynamics AX 2009. The team field. In the team field, you can define which team collection agents will be assigned to in the collection agents form. Only teams with a type of collections are displayed in the list. The setup of collections teams we'll talk about later on in Lesson 3. In the write-off area of the collections parameters, there's a field called Separate Sales Tax. When you mark this option, you define whether you want to create a separate journal line for sales tax amounts when write-off transactions are created by using the collections form. So if you select this option, a separate journal line will be created for sales tax amounts. If you don't, it'll be included in the same line. The write-off journal field. When you select this option, you define the journal name that will be used when a transaction is written off using the collections form. The collections management module allows you to write off transactions. Those write-off transactions will use the write-off journal name configuration that we have set up here. Reason code. When you select this option, you're defining the default reason code that will come into play when you process a write-off transaction in the collections management module. In the email template area, you can select transactions to contact, statement to contact, transactions to salesperson by selecting an email ID. So those are the additional parameters added into the accounts receivable parameters form that are specific to the collections management module in Microsoft Dynamics AX 2012. Let's talk about Lesson 3, the setup of collections management. This lesson introduces the setup tasks involved to prepare collections management functionality for use in Microsoft Dynamics AX 2012. There are some related setup components for configuring collections management for use with Microsoft Dynamics AX 2012. The setup components will drive how you use the module. The setup of collections management includes all of the following components: setup of aging period definitions, the creation of aging snapshots, the creation of customer pools, the creation of collection teams, the setup of collections case categories, the setup of journal names, the setup of reason codes for write-off transactions, the setup of collection agents, the setup of a write-off account, the setup of NSF information for bank accounts, and the setup of Outlook settings for users of the collectors form, the setup email and address settings for collection customer contacts, the setup of email settings for salespeople, the setup of interest rates for an interest code, and the setup of interest calculations. So let's go into AX and investigate each of these setup components. The first one that we'll talk about is the setup of aging period definitions. An aging period definition defines the columns that appear on the collections customers, collection activities, and collection cases list pages. You can use aging period definitions to analyze the maturity of customer accounts and vendor accounts based on a date that you enter. It also defines the periods that are shown in the collections form. If a customer pool is set up, the aging period definition for the pool is used. If no pools are set up, the default aging period definition that is specified on the Collections tab of the Accounts Receivable Parameters form, which we looked at in Lesson 2, will be used. So to set up an aging period definition in Microsoft Dynamics AX 2012, go to Accounts Receivable, Setup. You'll see a Collections menu item added, and Aging Period Definitions to open the Aging Period Definitions form. In the Aging Period Definitions form, you can create a new Aging Period Definition by clicking the New button, entering the name for the Aging Period Definition, entering a description for the Aging Period Definition, and then adding the details of how you want your individual periods defined, which will come into play when you're viewing collections data via the collections list pages. The next thing that we'll talk about is the creation of aging snapshots. In Microsoft Dynamics AX 2012, you would create aging snapshot records for all customers or for the customers in a given customer pool. Aging snapshot information is shown on the Collections Customers List page and in the Collections form. You must create an aging snapshot before you can use the list page. If you do not create aging snapshots and regularly update your aging snapshots, the customer aging balances that you view in the Collections form will not be updated accordingly. So to set up aging snapshots, Accounts Receivable, Periodic, Collections, and Customer Aging Snapshot to open the Customer Aging Snapshot form. So in the Customer Aging Snapshot form, you'll see an Aging Period Definition field. When you select the drop-down list there, you'll be able to see the individual aging period definitions that you would have already defined. There's a pool ID field, so once you select the aging period definition, you have the option to select a pool ID. A pool ID is essentially a subset of customer accounts, so it allows you to break it down at a more detailed level as far as which customer accounts you want to create an aging snapshot for. In the criteria field, you can select the appropriate date value, which will be based on either transaction date, due date, or document date. And in the aging as of field, you have the option to select today's date or a selected date. If you select the selected date, you'll have another field where you can enter the actual date. So when you're ready to create the customer aging snapshot, you just click the OK button in the customer aging snapshot form, and the customer account balances will be updated accordingly based on the selections that you made in this form. The next setup component that we'll talk about is the creation of customer pools. In Microsoft Dynamics AX 2012, you can create customer pools which represent a group or a subset of customers. You can use customer pools as filters for the customer information in the collections list pages, or when you create aging snapshots. Customer pools are, of course, an optional setup. So to create customer pools, we'll go to, again, Accounts Receivable, Setup, Collections, Customer Pools to open the Customer Pools form. So if you wanted to create a new Customer Pools pool ID, you click the New button. You click the New button, you have the ability to enter a name for the pool ID, description for the pool ID, and a pool type, which of course you'll select Collections. When you select the Select Pool Criteria button, you can determine which customers are included in the pool. For example, with this pool ID, I've entered a criteria so that the customer accounts falling within the range of 3001 to 3012 will be included. At the top of the Customer Pools form, there's a Preview Customer Pool button, which allows you to see the individual customer accounts that fall in based on the select pool criteria that you had defined. So I'll go back to the Customer Pools form. So the Customer Pools form allows you to create a subset of customers in a way that allows you to define an aging period snapshot at the customer pool level, And in the collection list pages, you can filter data based on a given customer pool. Next thing that we'll talk about is the creation of collections teams as a setup component. In Microsoft Dynamics AX 2012, you have the ability to create collection teams. If multiple people in your organization do collections work, you can set up a collections team. You can select the team on the Collections tab of the Accounts Receivable Parameters form, which we looked at prior. If you do not create a collections team, one will be created automatically when you set up collection agents in the Collection Agents form. Collection teams are an optional setup. So if you wanted to create a collections team, you'd go to Organization Administration, Setup, Organization, Teams, to open the Teams form. If you wanted to create a collections team, you would select Team Types, and you can see the given team types available here. So if I wanted to create a new team, I could create new, but in the sample data set here, I already have a team called Collections. And I can see on the team members fast tab of the teams form that the users Julia Funderbrook and Daniel Brunner are mapped to the collections team that I've created. Now that we've talked about collection teams, let's talk about the next setup component, which involves the setup of collections case categories. So if you organize your collections work by using cases, you can set up a case category with a category type of collections. A collections case is a group of collection activities that can be used to better organize collections responsibility. This is required only if you want to use the case function in the collections form. So I'll go to Sales and Marketing, Setup, Cases, and Case Categories to open the Case Categories form. So if I wanted to create a new case category that I could use in collections, I could click the New button, select Case Category. I could enter a case category name, a case category of description. And the key here is in the category type field, you would select the category type of collections. So once you've defined a case category in the case categories form, you have the ability to use these case categories when using collection activities via the collections form in the collections management module. The next thing that we'll talk about is the setup of journal names. You will need to set up journal names to be used when transactions are processed in the collections form. This includes settling a transaction, writing off a transaction, or processing an NSF payment, all three being transactions that you can initiate via the collections form. To set up journal names for settlements, write-offs, and NSF payments as it relates to collections management functionality, you would use the journal names form, similarly to what you would use for creating journal names for other modules in Dynamics AX. So you would go to General Ledger, Setup, Journals, Journal Names. So the key here is you need to make sure that you have a journal name set up for settlements, write-offs, and NSFs, being three transactions that you can initiate via the collections form. Now that we're familiar with how to create journal names for each of the three transactions that you can use via the collections form, you can also set up reason codes for write-off transactions. When you create a reason code for write-off transactions, you can assign this as the default reason code on the Collections tab in the Accounts Receivable Parameters form. So that if we wanted to set up a reason code for write-off transactions, you go back to Accounts Receivable, Setup, Customers, and then Customer Reasons to open the Customer Reasons form. The Customer Reasons form, you can click the New button, enter a reason code, enter a default comment, and And now that you've created a reason code, you have the ability to use that write-off reason code for write-off transactions that you process in the collections management module. So let's talk about the next setup component, which is the setup of collection agents. You have the ability to set up collection agents if there are multiple people in your organization that do collections work. A collections agent is an employee or a contractor that has a user relationship to a Microsoft Dynamics AX user. You can assign customer pools to collection agents to help the agents organize their work. The collection agents are added to the team that is selected on the Collections tab of the Accounts Receivable Parameters form. If a team is not selected in that form, a new team named Collections is automatically created and the collections agents will be added to that team. So to set up collection agents, we'll go to Accounts Receivable, Setup, Collections Agents. You can see in the sample data set here, I have two collection agents, one Julia Funderburg and the other Daniel Brunner, which are assigned to my collections team. So if I wanted to add team members to the collections team, I would simply click the Add Team Members button. And I could do a search on the AX users that have user relations and add that to the collections team. If you're entering a certain more than one pool, if you're sending more than one pool to a collections agent, again, we have the Preview Customer Pool button, which allows you to see all of the customer accounts that particular collections agent will be responsible for. So collection agents, an important concept with Microsoft Dynamics AX 2012 collections management functionality. The next setup component that we'll talk about is the setup of a write-off account. Again, you can create a write-off transaction in the collections management functionality of Microsoft Dynamics AX 2012, but it's important that you have a write-off account set up for use in the general ledger write-off entry. So to make sure that a write-off account is specified, we'll go to Accounts Receivable, Setup, Customer Posting Profiles to open the Customer Posting Profiles form. If I look at our customer posting profiles here, you can see that there is a write-off account field added. So you'll need to map a write-off account to your respective customer posting profiles if you plan on processing write-off transactions in the collections management module. The next setup component that we'll talk about is the setup of NSF information for your bank accounts. So in the collections management module, via the collections form, you have the ability to process NSF payments. But you need to have NSF settings assigned at the bank account level. So to set up the NSF information for your bank accounts, we'll need to go to Cash and Bank Management, Common, and then Bank Accounts. From here, I'll double click on a bank account to open the Bank Accounts form. On the Currency Management Fast tab of the Bank Accounts form, you can see that there's an NSF Payment Journal field where you want to select the payment journal name to use when canceling a payment that has been returned because of NSF. And there's a Charges Group field where you select the Miscellaneous Charges Group to use for fees that you charge your customer for NSF payments. So if you plan on using NSF functionality in the collections form, you need to make sure that you have these two fields populated in the bank accounts form for your bank account. In the collections management module, you also have the ability to create activities or send email messages via the collections form. To do so, you need to verify that the Microsoft Office Outlook synchronization configuration key is selected and that Outlook synchronization is set up. So to make sure that the Microsoft Office Outlook synchronization configuration key is turned on, you'll go to System Administration, Setup, Licensing, and Licensing Configuration. You'll need to make sure that the Microsoft Outlook synchronization key is enabled. Assuming that you have the Microsoft Outlook synchronization configuration key turned on, if you want to send email messages to customer contacts from the collections form, you'll need to set up email addresses. the collections contact is used as the default contact in the collections form. You can also set up a statement address for the customer if statements should have a different address from the primary address. To set up email addresses for customer contacts for use in sending email messages via the collections form, we'll go to Accounts Receivable, Common, Customers, All Customers, which will open the Customers List page. Customers List page, I'll click on a customer account to open the Customers form. On the Credit and Collections Fast tab of the Customers form, there will be a Collections Contact field. Again, in the Collections Contact field, you can select a respective the person in the customer organization who works with your collections agent. This contact here is used as the default contact in the collections form and is the person to whom email messages are sent. So now that you have mapped a collections contact form, that will be the default for sending collections emails to this respective customer account. Conversely, if you wanted to send email messages to salespeople via the collections form, you'll need to set up an email address for your salespeople. You need to set up an email address for each sales representative in each commission sales group. So to do this, you go to Sales and Marketing, Setup, Commissions, Sales Groups to open the Commission Sales Groups form. For a sales representative who has a contact checkbox marked, you right-click in the name field and click View Details. Here I have a group called group number 10. I can click on the Sales Rep button, which will open the Sales Rep form, where I can see that David Johnson, Kevin Kelly, and Nancy Freehofer are my sales reps. Kevin Kelly has the contact checkbox marked. So in this scenario, Kevin Kelly, my salesperson, is mapped as the contact person for this commission sales group. So this will be the contact person that will default in, and the email address assigned to Kevin Kelly is what's going to be used for emailing the sales people via the collections form. So the next setup component that we'll talk about related to collections management in Microsoft Dynamics AX 2012 is the setup of interest rates for an interest code. In Microsoft Dynamics AX 2012, interest codes contain settings that determine when interest is charged and how it is calculated on overdue accounts. You can set up a single interest code and apply it to multiple customer posting profiles, billing codes, or to specific invoice lines. For each interest code, you can set up two types of rates. Rates for interest earnings, which represent revenue, or rates for interest payments, which represent an expense. These rates can both exist at the same time within the same interest code. Interest rates are then based on calculation types of either interest by percentage, interest by amount, or an interest by range. When an interest code is used to calculate interest, a separate interest note is created for each interest rate that is in effect during the time that the payment has exceeded the transaction due date. So to set up interest rates based on percentages, go to Accounts Receivable, Setup, Collections, Interest to open the interest form. If you wanted to create a new interest code, you'd click the New button, enter an interest code, enter a description for the interest code. In the Calculate Interest Every field, you would enter the rate of recurrence for the calculation and select the unit of time for the recurrence. For example, to set up an interest code that assesses 5% interest for every 2 months that the invoice payment exceeds the transaction due date, you would enter 2 in the calculation per field and select month. In the Ledger Posting Debit field, you are selecting the ledger account where earned interest earnings will be posted. In the Interest by Range field here, if you're going to do percentages, you would need to select None. And in the Calculate Interest Based On field is where you'd select percentage. So once you've selected Calculate Interest Based On Percentage, You can then define the individual minimum amounts and maximum amounts for the remaining fields related to the interest code. So that would be how to set up an interest rate based on a percentage. Next piece is the setup of interest rates based on amounts. So if you wanted to set up an interest rate based on amounts, you'd again click the new button via the interest form. In the calculate interest every field, you'd select the appropriate recurrence for the calculation and selecting the unit of time for the recurrence. Again, you'd select the ledger posting debit field and the interest by range field. The key here is if you're going to do an interest rate based on amount, in the calculate interest based on field, you need to select amount instead of percentage. Again, once you've selected the calculate interest based on amounts, you can enter the appropriate interest amount fields using the remaining fields below. And the third type of interest code that you can define is an interest rate based on a range. So again, via the interest form, you'd select your appropriate recurrence in the calculate interest every fields. You'd select your ledger posting debit field, defining the ledger account for which interest earnings will be posted. Defining your interest by range field, you'd select the type of interval that will be used. So you can do days or months here. And in the calculate interest based on field, you'd select whether to base the interest calculation on a percentage or amount. So if you've selected an interest by range of days, you notice that there's a ranges button. In the ranges field, you can select the from value and the interest value in defining a range for the interest code. In lesson 3, which we talk about the setup of collections management, the section of the setup of interest calculation provides a good example of the setting up an interest by range for amount, the setup of interest by range for days, and the setup of interest by range for months, specifically on pages 22 and 23, which would be good to further review how these interest codes can be defined. So once you've set up interest codes, you can set up interest calculations that allow the interest to be calculated based on your interest code configuration. So the next setup component that we'll talk about is the setup of interest calculations. So I'll go to accounts receivable setup, accounts receivable parameters to open the accounts receivable parameters form. And I'll go back to the collections tab. In the interest calculation field of the accounts receivable parameters form here, you'll see where you can select open and closed, open or closed. We talked about this in lesson 2, but these are defining how you want your interest to be based off. Do you want it to be based off of both open invoices and closed invoices, assuming that the invoices that are closed were paid after the due date? You want it to be based solely on open invoices that are overdue, or do you want it to be based solely on closed invoices where those invoices happen to be paid or settled after that invoice's due date? The other important piece for using interest calculations is back in the customer posting profile. So accounts receivable setup customer posting profiles. You'll notice that for each customer posting profile, there's going to be an interest checkbox, or mark the checkbox for interest. You'll also notice that there's an interest code field where you will select a respective interest code that you would have already created for use with that particular customer posting profile. So that covers the setup of collections management pieces as part of lesson 3. Again, the key here, or everything that we talked about in lesson 3, relates to things that you would set up in Dynamics AX 2012 that relate to being able to later use collections management functionality. So let's move on to lesson 4. Lesson 4, we'll talk about the key tasks of collections management. This lesson introduces the key tasks involved with collections management processes in Microsoft Dynamics AX 2012. Managing and collecting overdue transactions is a necessary function in many organizations. With collections management, most collections functionality is centralized into a single form called the collections form, and on 3 list pages: the collections list page, the activities list page, and the cases list page. Sometimes one person handles a company's collection for all customers. In other situations, a team of collection agents work together to manage collections. If your business needs require it, you can set up collection agents. Each collection agent can have 1 or more customer pools, which is a subset of customers. For example, a collection agent may be responsible for customers 4,000 through 4,500. So in Lesson 4, we'll explore some of the key tasks involved with collections, including viewing customer information on the collections customer list page, viewing collection activities on the collection activities list page, viewing collection cases on the collection cases list page, viewing detailed customer information, managing and organizing collection information for a respective customer account, including creating a new action, adding transactions and activities, updating an aging snapshot, calculating interest, and changing the collection status for a transaction, sending an email message to a contact or a salesperson from the customer account, writing off a transaction, processing an NSF payment, settling transactions, reimbursing a customer, or reprinting a document. So let's go back into Dynamics AX. And let's talk about the first component, a key task of collections management, which is viewing customer information on the customer or collections customers list page. By default, Dynamics AX users have access to all records that are shown on the collections list pages. If customer pools have been created, they can be used to filter the records. You can set up collection agents, which are employees who have a user relationship to a Microsoft Dynamics AX users. These collection agents can then filter information by using the customer pools that are assigned to them, or clear the filter field to view all records. There are three main list pages for viewing customer information through collections management. The first one being Collections Customers list page, the second one being Collections Activities list page, and the third one being the Cases list page. So let's talk about the first one, the Collections Customers list pages. Go to Accounts Receivable Common, Collections, and Collections. And this is the Collections Customers list page. Columns on the list page display customer balances and aged amounts by aging period. This information is stored in an aging snapshot, which we previously talked about. So the key here is you must update your aging snapshots so that the aging period values that you see are updated accordingly based on posted transactions. The aging periods are determined by the aging period definition that is used. The aging period definition is taken from the customer pool if one was specified from the pool query. If the pool does not have an aging period definition, the default aging period definition from the Collections tab of the Accounts Receivable Parameters form will be used. So again, you can see the pools here. If I wanted to filter by all the customer accounts assigned to the over 180 pool, I could select the over 180 pool as a filter here. Again, at the top from the Collections Customers list page, there's a Communicate and General tab where you can initiate collection-specific actions via the Collections Customers list page. So the Collections Customers list page is an important location where your collection agents will be using on a regular basis to initiate collections processes. The second of the three main list pages that we've added for collections management is the Collection Activities list page. So we'll go to Accounts Receivable, Common, Collections, Collection Activities. Here you can again select a filter on a respective pool. So I can filter on any of my pool IDs and see the collection activities for that pool. And then you can see the individual collection activities assigned for the customer accounts related to that pool. So the third such list page that we've added for the collections management module is the Collection Cases list page. So to view the Collections Cases list page, I'll go to Accounts Receivable, Common, Collections, Collection Cases. Again, similarly to the two list pages that we've talked about prior, you can use a filter on a pool. So if I wanted to see all collections cases for the pool ID of East, then I could see that via the Collections Cases list page. So now that we're familiar with using the list pages, let's talk a little bit more about viewing detailed customer information. So I'm going to go back to the Collections Customers list page, which again was Accounts Receivable, Common, Collections to open the Collections list page. From the Collections list page, I can click on a respective customer account and double click, and this is going to open the collections form. So you access the collections form via the collections list page. The collections form is really the key. This is the centralized view in the entire collections management module in Microsoft Dynamics AX 2012, where your collection agents will be spending the majority of their time. So in the collections form, if I wanted to see transactions, you can see there's an open transactions area where I can see all the open transactions for a respective customer account. So if I wanted to, view the detail of the transactions, I could come over here and click on transactions here, and this will open the customer transactions form. This is essentially the same form that you would access if you clicked the transactions button directly from the customers form. So again, a lot of things that you can do directly from the collections form. So this being that centralized hub of where you can drill into everything related to a respective customer account. So if I wanted to actually settle, payments or credits against invoices, I could do that via the collections form by going to transactions, settle open transactions. This will actually open the settle open transactions form, which is essentially the equivalent of the open transaction editing form from Microsoft Dynamics AX 2009. And I could also use the close transaction editing. So this will tell me the historical or settled transactions for this respective account that I have selected in the collections form. Otherwise, if I wanted to view some more details about the customer account, I can click the customer button, and this will actually open the customers form. Or if I wanted to view statistical data, I could click on customer stats, select the company, and then click open statistics. So this would be the way to view detailed customer information from this centralized hub, which is what we'll call the collections form. The next thing that we'll talk about in lesson 4 of key tasks of collections management is managing and organizing collections information for a customer. Again, the collections form is the central hub in the collections management module for managing and organizing collections information for your customers. So again, we'll go back to the collections form, which is again accessible from the collections customers list pages by just double-clicking on a customer account. So in the collections form, you can do things such as create a new collections action, task, appointment, or event. You can update an aging snapshot. You can calculate interest, or you can change the collection status for a transaction. Let's talk about how to do each of those 4 components via the collections form. All right, so the first thing that you'll do here is in the collections form, in this case I have a customer account selected, where I can actually see the open transactions that I have out here in the collections form. So what I could do here is if I wanted to assign a case activity, I could go assign activity to case, which will open the assign activity to case form. I'd enter a description, I'd enter a case category, and when I click the assign to case button here, then you would see that case ID added to the activities area of the collections form. So that would be a way for you to there are situations where you need to organize collections activities and transactions. For example, if you had to collect for 3 transactions, you can add them to a case and then manage activities that are related to your collections work on that case because it contains the 3 transactions. So the next thing you can do via the collections form is you can update an aging snapshot. So in order to update aged balances for your customer accounts and viewing the collections list pages, you need to update aging. So to update an aging snapshot for a single customer, you would simply click the Update Aging button via the collections form, and it will tell you with an info log the aging snapshot has been created for the customer account. So again, if you don't do the Update Aging for your collections customers, then the balances that you see in the collections list pages are not going to be updated accordingly. So this would be a way for you to update the aging snapshot for one customer account at a time. You can also do an update aging snapshot for a whole pool of customers in one shot. So that is updating an aging snapshot via the collections form. Next thing that you could do is calculate interest. So there are situations in collections processes where you need to calculate interest. If you needed to calculate interest for a single customer account, you could do so via the collections form by clicking the Calculate Interest button. To open the interest calculation form, you can enter the parameters that you want to use for defining the interest calculation, such as to include invoices, credit notes, payments, interest, the appropriate from and to date, which posting profile to use, and when you click the OK button, interest will be calculated accordingly. And the fourth kind of key task that you can do via the collections form here is to change the collection status for a transaction. So the statuses for collections management transactions that you can select from in Microsoft Dynamics AX 2012 include not disputed, disputed, promise to pay, and resolved. So if I wanted to change the collection status for a transaction, in the transaction area of the collections form, I would click on the transaction for which I want to change the status for, and simply select Change Status. This will open the Set the Transaction Status pop-up form, where I can select whether I want to assign a not disputed, disputed, promise to pay, or resolved, what reason code to assign to that collection status. And when I click the Change Status button, you'll notice that the collection status field in the transaction area of the collections form will have been changed based on what you selected for the status. So from the collections form, you can send an email message through Outlook. You can also automatically attach information about selected transactions or customer statements as a Microsoft Office Excel attachment. A couple of different types of email messages that you can send include sending an email message with selected transactions to a customer contact or salesperson, or sending an email message with an attached statement to a contact. So to initiate the email functionality, you'll essentially click the Communicate tab from the Collections form, where you have these options for transactions to contact, statement to contact, and transactions to salesperson in the email area on the Communicate tab. So this is where you'd be initiating those emails to the collections customer contact or the collections salesperson. So the next thing that we'll talk about as far as a key task of collections management, which again is going to be initiated from the collections form, is writing off a transaction. So if you were unable to collect from a customer, the collections management module allows you to write off that bad debt. The write-off transaction is created in a general journal and can contain up to 3 types of journal lines. So if I wanted to write off a transaction, again, you do that via the collections form. I'd select the transaction that I want to write off in the transactions area of the collections form, and simply click the write-off button. In this case, it gives me a warning message that one or more transactions are closed or marked for settlement, and that I can write off only open transactions that are not marked for settlement. So this would be how I would actually initiate a write-off of a customer transaction. So after the write-off transaction is posted, you can then settle the transaction. You can also enter a process an NSF payment directly from the collections form. So again, all of these key tasks in collections management we're driving from this central hub called the collections form. So if a payment is returned from the bank because of non-sufficient funds, you can cancel the payment in Dynamics AX 2012. Depending on the configuration in the bank accounts form for the affected bank account, a miscellaneous charges transaction can be created for the customer. If I wanted to process an NSF payment, I would simply click on the payment in the Open Transactions area and click on NSF. And when you click on NSF payment, you'll get a message that says that the selected transaction will be canceled and an NSF fee of blank value will be added to the selected customer account. So that NSF fee comes based on the miscellaneous charge group that I have to the bank account associated with this payment. So that would be how you process an NSF payment out of the collections management module via the collections form. And the next thing you can do via the collections form is to actually settle transactions. So in some cases, a payment or credit note is entered for a customer and is not immediately settled with the corresponding invoice. So in Microsoft Dynamics AX 2009, you would have clicked on Functions Open Transaction Editing from the Customers form. in Microsoft Dynamics AX 2012, you can actually do that via the collections form as well. So I can click the Settle button from the transactions area of the collections form. This opens the Settle Open Transactions form. In the Settle Open Transactions form, I can mark the transactions for settlement against each other. And again, click the Update button, which will update the settlement records accordingly. The next thing that you can do as a key task in collections management via the collections form is you can actually reprint the original version of a document. So all I would do is in the transactions area of the collections form, I'd click on my document, I'd click the reprint button. This will allow me to actually see the original document. From here I could do a print preview if I wanted to actually print reports of that. So those were the key tasks of collections management in Microsoft Dynamics AX 2012. The key there is all of these things are driven off of this central hub that we call the collections form. So the collections form is really where collection agents are going to be in, on a regular basis, doing updating aging snapshots, performing their collection activities, assigning cases to those, changing statuses of collection transactions, initiating emails to your customer contacts and salespeople, and all of that being done via the collections form. So now that we're familiar with some of the key tasks of collections management, let's move on to lesson 5, which is collection letters. This lesson describes how to set up letters in the collections management to control the posting and printing of collection letters to your customer accounts in Microsoft Dynamics AX 2012. So in Microsoft Dynamics AX 2012, you now have the ability to create collection customer letters through Microsoft Office Word as well as from Dynamics AX. After you have set up collection letters in the collection letter form, you can select options to control how collection letters are posted and printed. So the first thing that you must do is actually create a collection letter sequence which will drive how letters will be printed. So I'm going to go back into AX. Go to Accounts Receivable, Setup, Collections, and then Collection Letter to open the Collection Letter form. So in the Collection Letter form, I can click the New button to create a new collection letter sequence. In the line that is created automatically in the lower pane, you would select a code in the Collection Letter Code drop-down list. The starting point is Collection Letter 1. It is important to note that AX creates the first collection letter according to the due date on the invoice, the value that you entered for the grace period in the days field, and information that you enter in this line. In the remaining fields, such as fee amount, the minimum overdue balance, the days fields, you would enter the appropriate data so that you can dictate how the collection letter code is going to be defined. In lesson number 5, collection letters, specifically page 44 in the examples of collection letter sequences section, there's a table that illustrates the possible collection letter codes for sample collection letter sequences. That'll give you a good visual as far as how the various sequences and codes assigned to those will drive actually the documents that get printed on your collection letter. So after you've set up collection letters in the collection letter form, you can select options to control how collection letters are posted and printed. You can select the type of collection letters that are posted and printed in the collection letters field in the new collection letters form. Depending upon the option that you have selected in the Update Collection Letter Code on the Collections tab of the Accounts Receivable Parameters form, you can determine how to update the collection letter code after printing or posting. For example, suppose your company has three different letters that you can send to a customer and you have selected Printout. After you print the first collection letter, the second collection will be printed the next time that you print a collection letter for the same customer. So to specify when collection letters are posted, I'm going to go to Accounts Receivable Setup, Accounts Receivable Parameters, and click on the Collections tab. On the Collections tab, in the Update Collection Letter Code field, you would either select Printout or Posting. To specify how collection letters are printed, we'll go to Accounts Receivable, Periodic, Collections, and then click New Collection Letters to open the Creation of Collection Letter form. And here you can select a collection letter option. You can select collection per customer to print only one collection letter for the customer, regardless of the number of collection letter codes that apply to the customer. The text in the letter is displayed from the highest collection code that applies to the open transactions of the customer. If you wanted to print all collection letters for the customer, you'd simply select all. In the Use Posting From field, you'd select either Account or Select. When you enter Account, the posting accounts will be taken from those related to the customer account. When you enter Select, you could select an individual posting profile in the Posting Profile field. And then you just simply click OK to create the collection letters. So once you've actually created the collection letters, you could actually, there's a separate form where you'd actually want to print and post the collection letters. So this would actually be done via the Accounts Receivable, Periodic, Collections, Print, Post, Collection Letters forms. So the print, post, the collection letters that you see in the Print, Post, Collection Letters form are those letters that would have already been created via the New Collection Letters form. So from here, you'll have 3 different status values. Created, which means the collection letter job has been executed. Posted, meaning the collections letter has been posted. And canceled, meaning the collections letter was canceled. Here you can either print the collection letter or post the collection letter, which actually will change the status for the collection letter. So at this point, we'll start the labs. There's 2 different labs that kind of walk through everything that we've talked about in the collections management functionality, which I think will help tie everything together. So at this point, let's start the labs. Okay, lesson 6, collections management recap. This lesson serves as a means to recap the functionality of collections management that we've learned about in this module today in Microsoft Dynamics AX 2012. So again, collections management being a new module to Microsoft Dynamics AX 2012. It has some powerful and important functionality. So to recap, again, in Microsoft Dynamics AX 2012, accounts receivable collections information is managed in a central view called the collections form. Credit and collections managers can use this central view to manage collections. Collection agents can begin the collections process from customer lists that are generated by using predefined collection criteria. Before you begin to set up or work with collections, you should understand the concepts of customer aging snapshots and how they contain the calculated aging balances for a customer at a given point in time. You should also understand how customer pools can help you organize your work. So a customer pool, again, being creating a group or a subset of customers which you can map or assign to a collection agent. You should understand the concept of how collection agents can have their own customer pool, which really allows you to better organize and manage your collection activities for your collection agents associated with the collections team. The list pages, you should be familiar with how to use the list pages to organize collections, customers, activities, and cases via the 3 list pages that we talked about, which again was the first one was the collections customers list page, the second one being the collections activities list page, and the third one being the collections cases list page. You should understand the concept of all collections information for a customer is in one form, and you can take collections actions from that form. That form, again, being the collections form, which is accessed from the collections customers list page. You should understand the concept of being able to write off transactions in one step from the collections form, as well as the ability to create NSF payments in one simple step by simply clicking the button from the transactions area of the collections form. So then, again, this is a recap of the collections management functionality. Thanks for listening in and to the Module 8 Collections Management of Microsoft Dynamics AX 2012 today.
Partner Technical Services is a benefit provided to members in the Microsoft Partner Network to ensure success throughout the business cycle. Partner technical services include services offerings with packaged and custom solutions that can help increase revenue, accelerate the sales cycle, win more deals, beat competitors, expand a skill set, provide more reliable deployments, and increase customer satisfaction. Partner technical services technical consultants have the latest product, technical sales, and delivery expertise, and are committed to partner enablement via knowledge transfer. Through delivery of effective guidance, our consultants share best practices, empowering partners to continually deliver high-quality engagements to customers. When you enroll, re-enroll, or qualify for an upgrade, you will receive partner advisory hours allocated to your organization based on membership competency level. Until you enroll or re-enroll under the new structure, your existing benefit structure will continue. Partner advisory hours provide a single currency to use in obtaining partner technical services packaged and custom solutions. Your current allocation of advisory hours can be used to take advantage of the new offerings under partner technical services. You will only see a change to your advisory hour benefits when you enroll or re-enroll after October 2010. Optimize your business by gaining knowledge and increasing your capacity to successfully provide services to customers. Our offerings help your organization broaden your readiness and enhance your methodologies to further your reach in the marketplace. Accelerate the sales cycle, increase wins against the competition, and expand your business with partner technical services. With service offerings from PTS, you'll be able to proficiently convey the functionalities, value propositions, and key benefits of Microsoft products and solutions. Our best practices and guidance will help grow your market share. Ensure IT services are deployed effectively and successfully with a more reliable result. Sharing our best practices, PTS empowers you to perform operative deployments with minimal risk. If you have additional questions and wish to utilize your partner advisory hours for assistance, contact AskPTS@Microsoft.com or call 1-800-MPN-SOLVE.